In 1994, Ava Moses' core was taken to Auschwitz, where she and her twin were experimented on by Dr. Joseph Mengele as part of the greater conflict of the Second World War. 50 years later, Core compromised with Dr. Hans Munch to exchange a declaration of amnesty for a signed document affirming the events of the Holocaust in order to free herself of the burden of her past. Ava and Miriam Moses were born on January 31, 1934, to Alexander and Jaffa Moses, who already had two daughters, Elise and Edith. They were the only Jewish family in their town of Ports, Romania. In their early years, the twins and their family experienced relatively little discrimination. However, as the Nazi Party rose to power, things began to change. By the time the twins were 9 years old, their uncle and his family had moved to Palestine to escape persecution. And though their mother initially refused to leave, the Moses family soon tried to escape Romania, but they were caught at the edge of their property and forced back. Soon after, their father was baselessly arrested for tax evasion. Ava and Miriam were 10 when Nazi soldiers forcibly relocated their family to the Sihai ghetto in Shiblau-Silvani, Romania, where their father was tortured for gold and silver, which Nazis insisted he was hiding. Shortly thereafter, they were jammed into cattle cars and transported to Auschwitz. Within minutes of disembarking, the family was broken. The twins clung to their mother as an officer approached them and demanded to know if the girls were twins. When their mother replied, Ava and Miriam were pulled away, never to see their family again. Ava and Miriam were put into a transport vehicle with 16 other sets of twins and taken to be processed. They were tattooed, their heads shaved, and given dresses marked with a red star. Afterward, they were put in barracks at Birkenau with 2 other twin girls. Dr. Joseph Mengele entered the barrack wearing an elegant SS uniform and high glittering officer boots. He had white gloves and a stick. At first, I thought he was very handsome, like a movie star. Mengele was brilliant, ruthless, and drunk with possibilities. Commonly, twins were injected with a disease, followed immediately by the antidote to measure their bodily response. But there were other things too. Ava saw Roma twins sewn together to share the same circulatory system. They died of infection a few days later. Some twins were given poisons and drugs while their twin was used as a control. The rule was, if one twin died, the other was killed for a comparative post-mortem. Only 200 of over 1,500 sets of twins survived Mengele's experiments and the war. The Moses twins were put naked into a room 3 times a week for 6 to 8 hours, where every part of their body was studied and compared to the other twin and charts. 3 times a week they were taken to a blood lab where Nazi doctors measured how much blood could be taken from them without death. They were given at least 5 injections of unknown contents each time they went to the lab. One day, Ava became very sick. She had a high fever and was too weak to do much but lie in the bed in the hospital. The next day, Mengele came and looked at her fever chart and declared she had 2 weeks to live. But she knew she couldn't die because if she died, Miriam would be killed for a comparative autopsy. Against all odds, she lived. One day, Ava woke and the Nazis were gone. They had taken all the able-bodied people and fled. American planes flew overhead. Soon, the Nazis came to finish them off. They came suddenly out of the fog and sprayed machine gun bullets into the crowd. Ava fell. When she woke, she was surrounded by dead bodies, but the Nazi has gone. She only fainted. Later, Russian soldiers appeared through a heavy snowstorm and shared chocolate, cookies, and hugs. Auschwitz was liberated by the soldiers of the Red Army on January 7, 1945, 4 days before the twins' 11th birthday. For 9 months after the liberation, Ava and Miriam lived in 3 different refugee camps, but soon they were taken to live with their aunt and uncle in Romania, which had become communist in their absence. Ava did not care for communism, as Jews were often arrested for speaking out. Mengele was never punished. He bypassed Allied authorities disguised as a foot soldier and fled to South America. He had a family and settled on a farm in Paraguay. Later, he moved to Brazil and drowned while swimming in the sea in 1979. Ava and Miriam moved to Israel in 1950 at 16 years old and spent 8 years there. Ava attended an agricultural school and became a sergeant major in the Israeli Army Engineering Corps. In service, she met Michael Kor, another survivor. In 1960, she and Mickey were married in Tel Aviv. They moved to Terre Haute, Indiana, and had 2 children, Alex and Rena. Miriam remained in Israel. Ava didn't talk publicly about what happened to her in Auschwitz until 1978, when NBC aired The Holocaust, which inspired her to share her story. She and Miriam began searching for other Mengele survivors in 1978. In 1984, Ava founded Candles, Children of Auschwitz Nazi Deadly Experiment Survivors, with Miriam. Miriam was named vice president for Israeli survivors. It was called Candles because they wanted to shed light on the hidden and dark chapter of the Holocaust, especially Mengele. Miriam had had kidney problems ever since the experiments, as her kidneys hadn't grown since she was 10 years old. Ava donated a kidney in 1987, but 6 years later, after her second child, Miriam fell into renal failure and died on June 6, 1993. Ava was notified by voicemail and not given the opportunity to attend the funeral. Later in 1993, Ava met Hans Munch, a Nazi doctor from Auschwitz and colleague of Mengele. For a talk she planned to give, she was asked to contact Munch and ask him if he would talk with her at the event. Despite initial reservations, Ava contacted him. He was not interested in doing the talk, but he was also not what she expected. She described him as very kind, very considerate. They developed an acquaintance of sorts. Ava even asked him for any data he had on the experiments which he said Mengele had taken with him when he fled. Hans Munch became involved with the Nazi Party because he had mistakenly believed their propaganda, and rather ended up in the SS than truly believed in the cause. In fact, when asked later, he stated that he was quite disturbed by the concentration camps, which he claimed to not have known about before he was assigned to Auschwitz, where he signed the death certificates with the number of people who were killed in the gas chamber. No names. He told Ava in the years after the war he'd felt a great deal of guilt over what he had been complicit in. On January 27, 1995, for the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, Ava and her children, Dr. Alex Kor and Rena Kor, traveled to Auschwitz camp with Munch and his daughter, son, and granddaughter. They exchanged 2 documents. Ava had a letter of forgiveness for all the things he had done during the war, and Munch had a document which would certify that the Holocaust had happened and could be used to combat Holocaust deniers. At Auschwitz, Munch signed his document about the operation of the gas chambers, and Ava read her letter of forgiveness and signed it. This began Ava's campaign for forgiveness. She has faced conflict, especially from fellow survivors who view her compromise as condemnation of the actions of the Nazi Party during the Holocaust. However, that wasn't Ava's intention. In her view, the forgiveness is for herself, not for the Nazis. It's an effort to let go of the past and allow herself to move on in her life. She made international headlines in 2015 when she forgave and embraced Oscar Groening, the bookkeeper of death, at his trial where he was accused of being an accomplice in over 300,000 killings. She also adopted the grandson of Rudolf Höss, the notorious chief of Auschwitz, when his family disowned him due to his activism. In fact, when Ava had an old professor check her spelling on her letter to Munch, she challenged Ava to forgive Mengele as well. And, after months of consideration, months of speech with a figurative Mengele, over 50 years of intense anger, Ava Mozes Kor forgave the angel of death.